When a woman thought she could take everything from her ex-husband in a messy divorce, she didn't realize he had a plan of his own. Believing he was struggling, she pushed harder for more money, thinking the game was hers to win. But what she didn't know was that her ex-husband had been one step ahead all along. What seemed like a lost battle for him would soon turn into a shocking twist that would change everything. Neither of them was prepared for the surprising way their lives would spiral out of control. John Mitchell had always believed in hard work. Over the years, he had built a successful career, starting from nothing. His business had grown and he had made smart investments. Slowly, his life had turned into something comfortable. He owned a beautiful home, drove a luxury car, and had more than enough money to live comfortably. Life was finally good. Then there was his wife, Laura. When they first met, everything seemed perfect. She was beautiful, confident, and had a way of making him feel special. She would smile, hold his hand, and tell him how proud she was of everything he had achieved. They had so much in common, or so he thought. Their relationship felt real, and he believed they were a perfect match. But over time, something began to change. At first, it was small things. She would make comments about how nice their house was, but how it would be even better if they had a bigger one. She started asking for more expensive gifts, pushing him to upgrade their vacations to exotic places. He didn't mind at first. He loved making her happy, but soon it wasn't enough. No matter how much he gave, it was never quite enough for her. Then came the subtle hints. She began talking about how much more money they could have if he worked even harder, if he expanded his business or invested in other things. She made it clear that she liked the finer things in life, and that he should do whatever it took to give her everything she wanted. He started to wonder if her love for him was truly about him, or if it was just about the life he could provide. The tension grew over time. She was no longer the woman who supported him through the tough times. Now she was focused on the wealth he had accumulated. The affection they once shared was fading, replaced by demands and expectations. He couldn't help but feel like she was with him for his money, not for who he was. Still, he tried to make it work. They tried couples counseling, but things only seemed to get worse. She was distant and no longer seemed interested in fixing the relationship. She would go out with friends, spend more time away from home, and her conversations with him became more about what he could provide than anything personal. It was becoming clear that their marriage was built on something shallow, and it wasn't love anymore. Then came the divorce. She asked for it, and he agreed. He was tired of the constant fighting, the manipulation, and the feeling that he was being used. But little did he know, this was just the beginning of something much bigger. As soon as the divorce papers were signed, she made her demands clear. She wanted everything. The house, the car, the money, and, most importantly, alimony. She wasn't just asking for a fair share of what they had built together, she wanted it all. It was then that he realized something he had overlooked all along. His wife wasn't interested in a fair divorce. She had been planning this all along. Her true intentions were to drain him dry and take everything he had worked for. She wanted to live a life of luxury, and she saw him as the way to do it. But what she didn't know was that he wasn't going to let that happen. He had spent years building his life, and he wasn't going to let her destroy it. It was time to take control of the situation. He was going to turn the tables on her. After the divorce was finalized, the ex-husband sat alone in his office, staring at the papers before him. His life had changed dramatically, and he felt both a sense of loss and a burning desire to protect what was his. The settlement had left her with a generous alimony payment, but he knew it wasn't enough for her. She wanted more, and she would stop at nothing to get it. That thought gnawed at him. He couldn't let her take everything he had worked for. She had made it clear that she saw him as nothing more than a meal ticket, and he had to act before things spiraled out of control. He began formulating a plan, a way to make her believe that he was losing everything. After all, she had been so focused on his wealth and the lifestyle he could provide that he knew she would react to any sign of trouble. It was time to play her game, but on his terms. The first step was to make his finances appear much worse than they were. He called his accountant and asked for help. They devised a strategy to show that his income had drastically decreased, fewer business deals, investments that had gone bad, and even a few bad luck financial moves. The idea was simple: convince her that he was struggling, that the money she expected to come from him was no longer available. The more he could make her believe that he was in financial trouble, the more she would push for higher alimony and be driven by fear that she would lose the lifestyle she had grown used to. Next, he contacted a few old friends who had connections in the financial world. They helped him craft a narrative that would give the impression that his wealth was rapidly declining. He started to sell off assets nothing of great value, but enough to make her think he was no longer wealthy. His house was listed for sale, his cars were leased back to dealerships, and he began to downgrade his lifestyle publicly. He didn't actually sell anything of significant value, but he knew she would notice the changes. It wasn't long before she started to react. She began calling him more often, accusing him of hiding money, demanding more alimony, and even hinting at taking him to court. She had fallen right into his trap. He could feel the desperation in her voice each time she called. She was losing control of the situation, and he knew she would only push harder for more money. But he had anticipated this. He played the part of the struggling ex-husband to perfection. Every time she pushed for more money, he would act helpless, agreeing to whatever she asked for, all while making sure to let her know how difficult things had become for him. He wanted her to believe that her best bet was to get as much from him as possible before everything fell apart completely. What she didn't know was that he was securing his real wealth in secret. His true assets, investments, savings, and property were safely tucked away, hidden from her eyes. He knew exactly what he was doing. She had become so focused on getting as much money as she could that she hadn't stopped to think about the long-term consequences. As he watched her increasingly desperate behavior, he smiled to himself. She had no idea what was coming next. As the months passed, the ex-husband's plan continued to unfold. His ex-wife became more demanding, believing every false move he made. She pushed for more alimony, and he gave in, making sure to keep the appearance that he was struggling financially. But the deeper he got into the act, the more he realized how much his ex-wife had underestimated him. She was becoming increasingly erratic, and he began to see her true nature. She had started bragging to friends about her new life, the extravagant vacations, the designer clothes, and the nights out at expensive restaurants. All of this while she was still demanding alimony payments that would keep her in the lifestyle she had grown used to. She claimed she couldn't live without the financial support, that she needed to maintain her standard of living, and that he was obligated to provide it. At first, he let her flaunt her new lifestyle, knowing that it was only a matter of time before her arrogance would be her downfall. She was being careless, and he knew that this was a sign that she was about to make a huge mistake. She was becoming overconfident, thinking that he would never catch on. She assumed that he had nothing left, and that she could continue to squeeze him dry. But the ex-husband had been planning his next move all along. He knew that the one thing she loved more than money was the attention that came with it. She was always surrounded by friends and acquaintances, showing off her luxurious new life. This was the perfect opportunity to turn the tables on her. He contacted a few of her closest friends, planting the seed that he had hidden away large sums of money, that he was not as broke as he seemed. He knew that word would get around, and soon enough it did. Her social circle began to question whether she was being too greedy. There were whispers about how she was demanding money from him despite his financial struggles, and people started to notice how she was spending far more than she should have been. Her friends began to whisper about her behavior, how she was ignoring the fact that he was clearly having trouble keeping up with his own finances. It didn't take long for the rumors to reach her ears. She began to panic. The idea that her ex-husband had secretly retained a fortune was unsettling. What if he was hiding it all? What if the lavish lifestyle she had become so accustomed to was about to come crashing down? She had to act quickly. In a fit of desperation, she started pushing harder for more money. She demanded that he pay for her living expenses, for her luxury vacations, for her continued lavish lifestyle. She threatened to take him back to court, and she made it clear that she wouldn't stop until she had what she felt she was entitled to. The problem, however, was that her demands were becoming unreasonable, and it was becoming clear that she was willing to go to any lengths to get what she wanted. The ex-husband, however, remained calm. He knew that he had won the game. He had set her up perfectly. As the tension mounted and the walls of her carefully crafted life began to crumble, she had no idea that the real trap was still waiting for her. The plan he had set in motion was about to reach its final stage, and when the truth was revealed, she would have no way out. He had won, but she had no idea how far his strategy would go. Then one day, out of the blue, she received a letter. It wasn't just any letter. This was a legal document from his lawyer outlining a complete financial overview. It confirmed that he was far wealthier than she had ever imagined. He hadn't lost his fortune at all. In fact, he had been hiding large sums of money in different accounts and assets she had never known about. The letter explained that the alimony payments she had been receiving were about to stop. There was no need for her to continue receiving support if his financial situation had remained unchanged, which it had. The shock of the news hit her hard. She stared at the paper in disbelief. How had she been so blind? All this time she had thought he was struggling, that he had nothing left, but now she realized that she had been played. Her mind raced. She immediately tried to contact her lawyer, but the damage had already been done. The lawyer explained that the settlement would be re-evaluated, and the alimony would be reduced to a more reasonable amount, reflecting the truth about his financial situation. She could hardly believe it. Her entire plan had fallen apart. The life she had been living, the money she had expected to keep flowing, was now slipping away. She started to panic. Her mind scrambled, thinking about what to do next. She had always believed that her ex-husband was weak, that he would give in to her demands. But now she saw the truth. He was smarter than she had ever given him credit for. She had misjudged him, and now she was paying the price. In an act of desperation, she reached out to friends and family, hoping they could help her. But they all seemed to look at her differently now. They had heard the whispers, the rumors of her greed and entitlement. People were starting to talk, and it wasn't long before she realized that the public opinion was turning against her. Her dreams of financial security were collapsing, and all she could do was watch as everything she had hoped for slowly unraveled. But the real kicker came when she learned that her ex-husband had not only hidden his wealth, but had done it in a way that left no trace. He had outsmarted her at every turn, and there was nothing she could do to reverse it. The victory she had envisioned for herself had been snatched away. It was a harsh and bitter lesson in greed and deceit, and she was left with nothing but regret. Just when the ex-wife thought everything was lost, she found herself in a new kind of trouble. She had always believed that the legal battles were just a formality, that she could keep pushing for more and more. But her ex-husband had outwitted her completely. The truth of his hidden wealth had been exposed, and she was left with nothing but a reduced alimony and a tarnished reputation. However, as the situation seemed to settle, a shocking twist unfolded. It was a typical morning when the letter arrived. It wasn't a piece of legal paperwork, but a formal notice from a financial investigator. She opened it, expecting yet another detail about the ongoing financial settlements, but what she read turned her stomach. The letter revealed that her ex-husband's financial dealings had come under investigation. The money he had carefully hidden his business dealings, his assets were now under scrutiny by authorities. What seemed like a clever strategy to outsmart her was, in fact, drawing attention from those who could dig deeper into his finances. At first, she didn't believe it. After all, he had won. He had played her, gotten the upper hand, and now she was the one left in financial ruins. But the more she thought about it, the more the pieces began to fit. Her ex-husband hadn't just been hiding money, he had been hiding it from everyone. And now it was being questioned. The authorities had started to look into the methods he used to secure his wealth. They suspected that some of his financial maneuvers might not have been entirely legal. This revelation was both shocking and ironic. The very plan her ex-husband had used to turn the tables on her was now backfiring. His carefully orchestrated scheme to make her think he was struggling had led to a deeper investigation. While he thought he was playing her like a pawn, he hadn't accounted for the fact that such deception could draw unwanted attention from the authorities. As the investigation unfolded, things began to unravel for him in ways he never imagined. The same secrecy and manipulation he had used to deceive his ex-wife now made him the target of a legal probe. The truth of his wealth wasn't as clean as it appeared. There were questions about hidden accounts, false documentation, and shady financial practices that could easily lead to trouble. In a twist of fate, the investigation into his finances led to charges of fraud and financial misconduct. While he thought he had won the battle, his plan had set off a chain of events that would ruin him. His carefully constructed empire of wealth was starting to fall apart. The truth was catching up with him, and now he was facing the consequences of his own actions. Meanwhile, his ex-wife watched as the man who had once been her target of financial conquest was now the one in trouble. Her victory had been short-lived. The money she had hoped to gain from the alimony was not coming, and now she realized that he was not only more clever than she had thought, but the fall from grace that awaited him would be something she couldn't have predicted. In the end, the twisted game they both played ended in a way neither of them expected. She had lost the alimony and her reputation, and he had lost his freedom and his carefully built fortune. The true cost of greed had caught up with both of them, and neither of them was going to walk away unscathed. The plan that was supposed to make one of them victorious had instead led to both of their downfalls. The story of deceit, manipulation, and greed came full circle, leaving both of them with nothing.